presentation's changed slightly since the brief that you've seen, so it's less to do with how we're implementing BIM on projects, it's more to do with how we've addressed BIM effectively within our organisation and how we're working with external organisations to help progress. To start with, I'm going to run through a very potted history in terms of Tata Steel and how we've used digital information through for a number of years. Some of you in the room will be much more familiar with, I don't mean in terms of age, but in terms of knowledge areas, the first couple of points there, so numerical control of manufacturing equipment back in the 50s and 60s. Then on to computer numerical control in probably the late 60s and early 70s. The reason I put that up there is often, as I'm sure a lot of you do, I often get told when we're talking about BIM, digital information, that manufacturers have been doing this for a long time, so everyone else is catching up. I think elements of that are true, but it's a completely different kind of digital information, and exchanging the information with others is a completely different process that we all need to be aware of. Different challenge. The next one, between 87 and 98, there was a pan-European research and development project looking at computerized information for manufacture in the steel industry. So that was largely to do with how we exchange information from the manufacturing processes through to fabrication, through to construction on site. So a lot of different parties involved with that, not just the manufacturing side, subcontractors, fabricators, main contractors and so on. As you can see, it's quite a lengthy process to do that, but it was also looking at developing a set of standards that could be used going forwards. Those standards were the SimSteel Information Standards, or CIS1 as it says on there. The next version came out in 2000 and is still being used today in certain software formats. So for example, Tekla still uses this as a basis to exchange information between different formats. The next one, 2005, so this is when I first joined Tata Steel. So as was mentioned before, I'm an architect by background, so I'm used to using a range of different software packages. I'm used to 3D modelling, but it's the first time when I joined Tata Steel that I heard the phrase BIM. The first development, first project that I'd heard the phrase on was, again, another European development project called ManuBuild, which was looking at open building manufacturing. So how we develop standards for off-site building systems right across Europe, also including how you adapt technologies, whether it's information, specification, or the products themselves to suit different markets. What was interesting for me, and the reason I put it up there, was there were 4 main work areas within that program. And again, BIM was only ever really mentioned and covered in the IT part of that project. It wasn't really dealt with in terms of business processes, design or manufacturing. It was kept as a separate room almost in most of the program. It wasn't until a few years afterwards when a number of us looked back at the work that had been done at the beginning of that and realised the importance of it. 2008, we were looking at a number of demonstration projects to demonstrate different technologies and different product types and different supply chain routes. And then we were starting to look at RFID tagging. So tagging really for the logistics to start with. So at what phase of a manufacturing process were the different products? Then through to where is it in the delivery cycle towards your construction project? Once it gets to site, where on the site is it? When is it likely to be installed? Is it on program? Is it not on program? And then finally, in the operation of the building, obviously tagging to see this is the information on that product. This is where the product was manufactured, when it was delivered, who's responsible for it, etc. In 2011, I'll explain more on the next couple of slides, but we as Tata Steel cover a range of different sectors. And like a lot of larger organisations, we're made up of a lot of smaller different business units and manufacturing hubs and so on. What that means is that we often have historic systems, IT systems, procurement systems and tagging systems and so on. So what we found across all the range of products that we had identical products in some cases with very, very slightly different names because they were put into a computer system in a very slightly different way. Even just a space within the naming system meant it was very difficult for us to track what we were selling, what the main sellers were, who the main clients were, and linking all that together. but also enable us to do that across the different sectors that we operate in. So sometimes we'd have one customer, but because of the way the company was organised, it would see a sale in one sector and a separate sale in another one, as opposed to understanding where those two were pulled together. So first of all, we developed a cross-business digital platform that enables us to track all of that stuff on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, we know what products are being sold where, in what combinations, and so on. That, when it comes to BIM, has been an incredibly useful starting point, just to have a common way of describing internally what different products are. In terms of BIM, CalZip, which is one of our brands, in 2012 started to use 3D modelling a lot more intensively than before, largely to do with how you optimise a building envelope. So, for example, the Aquatic Centre, the original roof you're all familiar with a arched back. Originally, when that went to CalZip, there was a lot of there's so many curves on there. It meant that pretty much, I think it was 80% of the cladding panels on there needed to be curved in two directions, which is incredibly expensive to do on that scale. So using the 3D modelling processes that we had, linking actually Revit and Inventor, I think it was, we managed to change the design slightly, so the overall appearance was not too dissimilar, but the cost was significantly reduced. I mean, it could be delivered as opposed to just staying in the architect's original concept. In 2013, we started to have, again for CalZip, BIM objects on the National BIM Library. We created the objects ourselves internally, and then managed to get them on the National BIM Library website. And then 2014, we started to look at, early this year, at fully delivering a program right across our business. So I started looking at BIM pretty much full time at the end of 2013, and now we're delivering the full program, which I'll explain. So first of all, how do we look at the scope of the challenge? The first thing I did, to be honest, is pretty much lock myself away for 2 or 3 weeks, trying to understand, first of all, really what BIM was, what the implications were on the construction industry, not just in the UK, but internationally as well. Because as we're all aware, there's a lot of BIM wash out there at the moment, and it's trying to really find out what BIM was and the implications. Then it was looking at, the next step was looking at what the implications were for our business. So first of all, one thing we were driven by is, again, not just looking at what the UK are doing, because we operate across a number of different countries. So understanding what the differences and similarities are in those different requirements. And I'm sure many of you are aware, BIM is used as a process in lots of different countries now, but in slightly different ways for slightly different benefits. There's some really good reports by McGraw-Hill that I'd recommend you read if you're looking at the international markets to understand those different applications. Also internally is how you convince your organisation to invest in BIM if you think that's what they should do. So for us, one of the issues is, because we operate again across a range of sectors, it's balancing resource between those different sectors. So how do you convince different people in your organisation, different roles, that this is something that we should really be spending time, effort and money on? Thankfully we managed to do that. Then when it comes to construction, using Uniclass 1.4 as an example and as a basis for this. So this isn't in terms of volume of products, this is in terms of range of products that we need to address in a BIM format. First of all, we supply steel material as one of our supply chain routes. So we'll sell steel material to other manufacturers. So for example, we coated steel. We'll provide coated steel to cladding manufacturers for them to then sell their construction products into the construction market. In terms of material, when you look at the high-level classifications in Uniclass, we cover each of those classifications. That doesn't mean that we need to provide BIM models for each of those materials, or BIM content for those materials. We just need to make sure that our information is suitable for the next person in the supply chain effectively, and they can then create whatever they need to for the market from there. In terms of products, we still cover around 20% of those in terms of classification. So structural products, cladding products, building services products, and so on. And if any of you have started along the BIM process, you'll understand that the way you create content is sometimes different for different tools and different product types, because they're all used in a slightly different way. So how do we start to address that as a challenge then? First of all, as the last two speakers have said, we wanted to really understand our strategy first of all, looking at the overall mix of products that we had, the benefits for that, but also in an individual product level. How do we think the BIM process will impact on that as a specific product? And how do we think we can help the process through providing better information? Enabling projects as well. So, as I said, we've looked quite extensively at international standards that already exist in different countries, and to understand the differences between those. But also, we're very closely following how standards and guidance is developing in different countries. On top of that, we've developed the existing internal digital platform. So we have materials and products databases specifically set up for us to provide information in this kind of format. Obviously developing content then, so I think I showed you on the last slide, quite a scary figure. In construction we have over 23,000 unique products. So that could be a steel section with a certain dimension, certain grade of steel. It obviously doesn't mean that you do 23,000 BIM objects. You start to classify the different templates that you use, different levels of similarity, and then from that we're probably looking at, for all those products, 100 to 150 BIM objects effectively. Also, and again, making sure that whatever information we put in there, I'll show in the next slide, is relevant to the position of use as well, whether it's a specific country, a specific sector, even potentially a specific role, making sure that we can provide the right information to the right people at the right time. And then finally, I think this is something that people often forget, is making sure you have the internal capability and knowledge as to what it is that you're providing. So the BIM for M2 that I'll come on to explain a bit more about in the future, we're doing a survey at the moment of manufacturers. And again, one of the things that has come back from those that already provide BIM content, I think a lot of manufacturers aren't clear as to what it is that they're really providing. So some have gone to external providers, and so they can say that they have BIM, they just don't really understand how that can effectively be used and the value of that information, whether it complies with the relevant standards. So first of all, in this case, as I said, making sure that your sales team, as well as everyone else, anyone that is in contact with the outside world, with your customers, is aware of what BIM is and how your company is using it. So the first thing we did with all those different product types and all those different requirements is look at how we set up a basic structure for any kind of information, for any product type in any location. And actually we think it comes down, ignoring the project for a minute, in terms of a product in a certain location, we think it comes into those 5 key categories in the middle there. So we set up a framework internally, a database effectively, of a huge list of parameters for us to start from. So the top ones, product type parameters, and these are really based on IFC that's been mentioned before. So for a specific product type, these are the potential parameters that we need to look at, wherever it's going to be applied, whichever format it's going to be applied in. Then we have Tata Steel specific ones, but some of those are very straightforward, such as point of contact for the technical product technical teams or the commercial teams, or feedback on the models themselves. And some are more specific to the performance issues of a specific product type. Next one, software specific ones. So for example, Revit has not many, but a few specific parameters for Revit, and again other software types sometimes have the same. National parameters, in this case, in the UK, COBE is the one. So again, that's impacted by product type and geography. Obviously, the combination of those two decide what kind of parameters need to be in there. And then finally, specification systems. So So again, obviously the common one in the UK is MBS, so making sure that potentially we provide information that makes it easier to specify and make sure the flow of information goes through. Obviously for any given product type, that's potentially a huge amount of parameters. It doesn't mean that we include all of those potential parameters in any one object. It means that we use that as a filtering process to narrow down to the information that we think is important for its application. So from that, we use our newly developed product and materials database to feed into that framework to give us effectively the data that we then issue as part of an object. So in the first phase, we'll be issuing object geometries, which will be in Autodesk Revit and potentially IFC. But in addition to that, separate data sheets. So XML, Excel data sheets. The reason for doing that is because, again, if you speak to some of the issues we mentioned before, sometimes as a manufacturer you obviously get asked for all of your BIM content without people really knowing what it is that they're asking for. Sometimes you get very specific requests for specific pieces of information. You also get some people saying, we don't want any data in the models, we provide the data ourselves, which is a discussion I was having with someone earlier today. And others say we don't want all that information, we just want that piece of information. So by separating it out slightly, you enable the user of that information, of that content, to pick the relevant bits of information for them. There's some bits that are always required, but some bits they can pick and choose so that it's optimized for their use. And again, the benefit of that is that you don't overload their models with information that actually for their particular product types or project types won't be relevant. This is based on the British Standard 8541. I don't know if some of you are aware of this. Different types of objects are quite neatly defined in there. The reason for me showing this is partly the type of information that is included in each, but also where we sit as a manufacturer. So we very rarely, if at all, will do generic objects, which is before a specific product type is available. We tend to concentrate, as most manufacturers do, and as most manufacturers should, I believe, in the product objects. One of the complications we have, again, is we provide materials as well as providing full products. So sometimes it's providing material information for others to use in their products, and sometimes it's providing the full geometry, material and performance information. What we don't do as a rule, we don't get involved with doing specific project models, occurrence models, so where those products or a combination of products are used in a specific project. As I said, that's a general rule. We do it for certain applications. So, for example, Calzip, they do that. They tend to do specific product models because of the complexity of their product type and the need to specifically address certain geometries. They do that. But as a rule, we don't do that. The reason for showing this, first of all, again, different parts of the delivery of a construction project along the bottom there, and different levels of detail of information, effectively, levels of granularity. So whether you're talking about facilities, elements, spaces and products. This is obviously quite a generic graph because all projects are different, but if you use the grey line, first of all, a more traditional flow of information where for a lot of products you won't really be talking about product level information until you get to the end of the design phase, building commission phase. With BIM, obviously a lot of those discussions are brought forward. It doesn't mean that they're fully resolved, it means that some of those discussions are brought forward. I've used this quite a lot internally to talk to different product managers, different product teams. To say, first of all, as a manufacturer, you're potentially talking to not just a different stage of the project, but a different audience with different information requirements, and probably using a different language to what it is that you're used to. So you can't just go with your old brochure and talk to, with span tables and all that kind of stuff to a client, for example, a facilities owner. It doesn't really make much sense to them. So you need to understand the benefits of your products and how you describe your products more effectively at different stages of a project. It also provides opportunities in doing that, though. Again, you just got to understand the differences in doing that. the other reason for showing this is, although we're using a template approach and everything's linked to databases, as I mentioned before, we do look at every individual product type differently and the flow of information through a typical project. So we do that in consultation with, again, with our product teams obviously, but with clients as well, as specifiers, contractors and so on, to understand how we can improve the flow of information through a project. We've obviously spoke a lot today about Autodesk Revit, and again, a lot of the issues where we try and resolve is the front end. So how do you go from another design piece of software, like calculation software, for example, for structural engineering, into something like Revit or another BIM software, and also the other end as well. How do you make sure that information flows out at different stages of a project? So again, we look at every single product type differently and how we can best improve that flow of information. So going forward, once we've completed the current program, so it's come out incredibly poorly in terms of the screen, but the reason we've looked to adopt BIM to the degree we have is less about the UK government's requirements for 2016. It is much more of a longer term vision. So we see this, as John said before, as a step change in the way the industry is going to work. So just a description of that, or just an illustration of that. McKinsey did a report early last year on, across all sectors, not just construction, what they saw as disruptive technologies. And they ended up looking at identifying 12 disruptive technologies that have a significant change on the way we live, the way we operate, and our economic environment as well. The vertical axis here is the potential economic impact of those types of technologies. Along the bottom axis here is the height, basically number of articles and so on a logarithmic scale. What's interesting for me is if you look at the red dots towards the top there, they're all linked to digital information, improving digital information, improving digital processes. They're the ones that are going to have the big impact. Again, if you talk to Mark Beer and others about level 3 of the general direction of travel for that, they talk about getting messages from your building on your iPhone. So you might get a message or a tweet from your building, excuse me, saying if you don't clean the gutter in the next 2 days, it's going to leak and this is going to cause you all these problems. So simple things like that. It needs to be down to that level of application for us to get real benefits from this in the future. And it will be multi-sector. It's not just about construction anymore. It's about crossing over between different sectors. So when you look at that, we don't believe you can do that on your own as a one-off manufacturer, or even potentially as a group of manufacturers. We need to broaden it out a bit more. So one of the ways we've done that is we have a group called BIM for M2, BIM for Manufacturers and Manufacturing. So, as John mentioned, as part of the UK's strategy, they're obviously trying to engage as much as possible with different parts of the industry. Firstly, to understand the issues, and then to spread the word in terms of this is how the process is going, and we need your involvement in developing the solutions. So there are a number of BIM for communities, so BIM for SME, we mentioned, BIM for manufacturers now, and I think there's probably a dozen or so, yeah. So we were set up with closely linked to the CPA, so Construction Products Association, so we were set up as part of the CPA, but we separated from it for a number of reasons. We're still very closely linked. It just means that as a separate organisation, we can be much more driven by what we really need to deliver, the changes we need to deliver. So the overall strategy, this is obviously a long-term strategy, but it's making sure that we can, as the UK construction products industry, be seen as a world leader in terms of integration of digital information. So we only launched, I think, the beginning of April, but we're already having quite a big impact in terms of the way the process is going now. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen that the government's construction strategy 2025. One of the key targets is to reduce the trade gap for supply of products and materials. So that's probably the one I think always gets missed, but that's one of the key targets. So again, where you're speaking to different industry groups or different parts of government and so on, everyone's really keen to speak to manufacturers as a group.
to make sure they have the right kind of information. The other BIM 4 groups as well, there's BIM for water, BIM for clients, BIM for data centers and so on. They're all really keen to agree with the manufacturing sector. This is how we describe our different product types. This is the information that we're looking for. So the collaboration on that front has already been fantastic. So what are we doing? We have just under 40 member organisations at the moment. It's all voluntary. And again, if thinking of the Uniclass, we probably cover that full classification with the organisations we already have. But it's an open membership, so if anyone else wants to join, they're more than welcome to. We just got to find out the best place to sit and get you involved. But the 3 key working groups we have at the moment on the screen there. I'll start with data templates first of all. Pick an awkward one. So the first thing we did, again, we looked around to see the different existing systems for classifying or describing types of information that a product manufacturer should provide. And to be honest, the more experts we spoke to, the more confused I think we were. So we finally managed to we're getting to the bottom of that now through the things like the TSB bid, the digital plan of work, and also we've done quite a lot of work with CIBC on the product data templates. So the product data templates, again, they basically separate product information from project information. So as John and Connor have mentioned, COBE, in crude terms, is a massive, very complicated spreadsheet. That is the handover of information, the exchange of information format from to the building or facilities owner. If you look at it from a manufacturer's perspective, you look at the COBE templates, they can appear very, very complicated, understandably. So the product data templates are there to try and simplify that kind of information that's required for your specific product type. Because it's developed by CIBC, there's obviously a heavy focus on building services at the moment, but then that's now spreading out across all the other products as well. So we as BIM for M2 and some of the other BIM 4 groups are trying to maximise the coverage across all product ranges. The idea of that is it acts as a way of collating your information and then inputting that into whichever format we think is relevant going forwards. So it doesn't preclude any other approach once it goes to inputting that information. It's just a good way of collecting information to start with. And most manufacturers we speak to, that have started to go through that process, find it an easy way to begin to get on board. The education group, so again, partly linked to the survey that I mentioned already that we're currently progressing. We're setting up developing a diagnostic tool effectively. So we think, again, instead of us standing here and saying you must adopt BIM, I don't think that's the right approach, because as again John and Connor said, it suits different manufacturers or impacts on different manufacturers very differently, depending on the types of products you supply, the supply chain routes and so on, and also whether you sell to the private sector or public sector, whether you're international or not international. A lot of questions to be asked before you get down to should you be investing in this as a process. But basically, completely agree with what John and Connor said. You need to find your own strategy. So this education tool, this diagnostic tool, is hopefully there to help us decide as different manufacturers what we should be doing. So first of all, what does BIM really mean from a manufacturer's perspective? Even that simple level of definitions. So again, a lot of dictionaries we see out there at the moment, for example, one quite widely used has a definition for material. Material in that means any kind of information or data. Obviously for most manufacturers, material is something completely different. So it's making sure that we're very clear on the definitions using the language that we're familiar with. The next thing is, again, why is it important to your organisation? So these will be a series of questions for you to answer, and then these are kind of different routes available. But then finally, again, the big one that we get asked is how do we do it? What are the options available? And again, as Connor mentioned, it could be as simple as a spreadsheet, it could be as complex as project models for your specific product type, it could be anywhere in between. One of the things we want to do though, because again, a lot of manufacturers at the moment are seeing all the kind of BIM wash out there, seeing all the potential confusion, saying actually we'll just wait and see what happens until 2016 and we'll see from there what it is that we're going to do next. One of the things we're going to do with this though is show typical timescales that are involved with doing this, so you can start to plan ahead a little bit in terms of those different options. Also, if you speak to content providers, what kind of questions you should be asking, because similar to Connor, when we first started to look at this, one content provider, not one of the big boys, came to us and said, we'll create models for all of your products for £2,500 per product. And again, when you're talking about the number of products that we're talking about, yeah, I can see the face. Yeah, none of that isn't required. At the very basic level, you can do this yourselves with the right support and right tools. You don't need that kind of level of investment. The final one, the promotions group. So this is two ways. It's promoting things like the survey to manufacturers. So I'd encourage you to complete that if you want to get your voice across. That would be fantastic. But also getting across the manufacturer's voice into government and into other communities to make sure our voice is heard. So you'll get these slides anyway, I believe, but it's worth having a look at the website, and again on the website you'll see the link to the survey. And again, as many people as can complete that, the better. That's it for me. Thank you.